I used to wish my father didn't exist. It's a terrible thing to say out loud. I know that. But if I'm going to be honest, brutally honest, that's where this story has to start. My name's Ethan Carter. I'm 32. I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm an architect, successful by most standards. People think I'm put together, sharp, dependable. But if they ever asked about my father, I'd always change the subject. Because the truth is, I didn't just distance myself from him. I erased him. Carl Carter, my father, was a man of silence. A blue-collar mechanic in a forgotten Wyoming town where the winters dragged and dreams rarely made it past the county line. He worked at the same repair shop for over 3 decades, wore flannel every season, and never once said he loved me. And maybe I could have accepted that if he hadn't changed so drastically after my mother died. My mom, Emily, was light. That's the only word I can use to describe her. She hummed when she cooked. She danced barefoot in the kitchen with me when I was little. She used to cup my cheeks and say, "You're my sunrise, Ethan. Never forget that." But cancer came like a thief, and by the time I was 10, her light was gone. And so was he. I remember standing next to him at her funeral, our hands inches apart, but him never once reaching for mine. I remember crying in my room, loudly, hoping he'd come in. He never did. The silence that settled between us was the kind that echoed. As I got older, that silence hardened into resentment. He missed every school play, every award ceremony. He never asked about my dreams. He just worked, came home, drank a single beer, watched late-night TV, and slept in the recliner. I left for college at 18 and didn't look back. Not once. For 14 years, I convinced myself he didn't care, so I stopped caring, too. Until 2 weeks ago when I got that call. I was in the middle of revising plans for a city renovation project when my phone rang with an unknown Wyoming number. I nearly declined it. "Mr. Ethan Carter?" A calm female voice asked. "Yes. I'm calling from Powell County Hospital. Your father, Carl Carter, was brought in this morning. He suffered a stroke. He's stable but unconscious. We recommend you come as soon as you can." I said nothing. I just stared at the monitor, at the lifeless CD drawing in front of me, feeling like I was 12 years old again. Alone, confused, and not sure whether to cry or run. That night, I flew back to a place I never wanted to return to. The Powell Town sign was still crooked. The gas station, the diner, even the faded mural of a cowboy on Main Street. It was like time had hit pause after I left. And the house, our house, looked like it had been mourning, too. Paint chipped from the siding. The porch light dangled, flickering. And on the front step sat the same rusty wind chime my mom used to adore, barely clinking in the cold air. Inside, the scent of old wood, oil, and loneliness greeted me. At the hospital, he looked worse than I imagined. Wires, tubes, monitors beeping in a sterile rhythm. His face had sunken. One hand lay limp across the blanket. The other twitched faintly when I entered. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't even sure why I was there. I just sat, watched, wondered if he could hear me. The nurse said his chances of waking were 50-50. "Depends on the swelling," she added gently. Later that evening, back at the house, I walked through memories like landmines. The hallway where Mom used to hang our pictures, now bare. The kitchen table with one less chair. My old room, still painted navy blue with glow-in-the-dark stars faintly clinging to the ceiling. But it was the garage, the place that always smelled of metal, grease, and my father, that held something I never expected to find. Behind a stack of dusty boxes and a rusted toolbox, I found a small, battered leather notebook, tucked away like it wasn't meant to be found. Inside, in stiff, blocky handwriting, were entries. Journal entries. About me. About Mom. About everything I thought he'd never noticed. June 9th, 1995, Ethan asked if he could sleep in my bed tonight. I said no. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how to hold someone without her. November 12th, 1996, he drew a picture of his mother at school. Said it was for Parent Art Day. I told him I had to work. I drove to the school anyway. Watched through the window from the truck. He gave the drawing to a teacher. Kept it, It's under my mattress. April 18th, 2000. He got accepted into the university. I left the acceptance letter on the counter with a note that said, "Good job." I should have said more. I should have hugged him. But my hands wouldn't move. I turned the pages, and with every line, my heart cracked wider. This wasn't the story I had written in my head. This wasn't a man who didn't care. This was a man drowning silently. One who loved deeply but didn't know how to surface after losing his anchor. My mother. I found more. Letters he never sent, sketches of mechanical parts with my name scrawled in the margins, even one entry where he tried, really tried, to write a speech for my high school graduation. He never gave it. He just watched from the back row and clapped last. The man I hated had been loving me the only way he knew how. I sat in that garage, notebook in hand, until dawn peeked over the Wyoming plains. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt seen. The first time he opened his eyes, I wasn't sure if it was real. I had drifted off in the hospital chair, the old leather notebook clutched to my chest like a lifeline. The room smelled of antiseptic and machines. The soft rhythmic beep of his heart monitor was the only indication that time hadn't stopped. Then I felt something. Movement. His hand. Just a twitch, but enough to jolt me awake. I leaned forward, and his eyes, familiar, tired, gray like storm clouds, were open. "Dad?" I whispered, standing up slowly, afraid to break the moment. He blinked slowly, confused, tried to speak, but nothing came out. His mouth moved, but only air escaped. I pressed the nurse button, but my eyes stayed locked on his. Something passed between us. A flicker of recognition. A flicker of fear? Or maybe it was mine. His stroke had done its damage. The doctors said it had impaired both his speech and movement on his right side. But he was alive, present, and for now that was enough. I started showing up every day. I brought coffee I never drank, a playlist of old jazz records he used to hum along with in the garage, and the photo of Mom from the hallway, the one where she's laughing with her eyes closed, wind blowing through her hair on some forgotten beach trip. Some days he was alert. Some days he just slept. But I stayed. At first, our conversations were one-sided. I'd read from the notebook. Sometimes I'd share stories from work, or memories I thought were long buried. He couldn't speak, but he listened, really listened. And slowly he began to respond in small, deliberate ways. A blink for yes, a slow glance for no, a faint squeeze of my hand when I read something from the journal that cut too close. We were building something new, wordless but no less real. I remember one afternoon, I brought in one of Mom's old recipes, a peach cobbler she used to bake every fall. I set it down in front of him, and his eyes welled up. He couldn't eat much, but he leaned forward, inhaled deeply, and looked at me with such pain and gratitude, I had to look away. Later, as I wheeled him down the hallway, he motioned weakly toward the window. I turned his chair and sat beside him. Outside, the sun was dipping low over the trees. Warm gold bled across the sky, and for a brief moment, it looked like a painting. Like Mom's paintings. She used to sketch sunsets in her journal, right next to scribbled poems about me and Dad. She loved this time of day, I said softly. He blinked once. Then he reached out and, with great effort, tapped his chest once, and pointed at me. I knew what he meant. She's still with us. It broke me. That night, after putting him to bed, I walked the long hospital hallway alone, the journal tucked under my arm. And for the first time in my life, I whispered something I'd never had the courage to say before. I forgive you, not just for the past, but for all the quiet he didn't know how to fill. For the love he never found the words for. For the boy I was and the man I became in his silence. And somewhere inside me, I knew he had forgiven me, too. He came home a month later. I turned the old dining room into a bedroom for him. Bright, close to the porch with wide windows that looked out onto the backyard. I installed rails, a ramp, adjusted every piece of furniture to make things easier. But some days weren't easy. He was frustrated often, trapped inside his own body. He'd reach for a word that wouldn't come. slam a hand down in anger, or close his eyes and shut the world out. Still, we kept going, inch by inch, gesture by gesture. Then one night I found it, buried deep in a storage box labeled scrap. Among rusted bolts and old newspaper clippings was a rolled-up blueprint, faded, detailed, precise. A bridge, spanning a creek. The drawing was symmetrical, almost poetic in its design. The lines were smooth, mathematical, but filled with subtle artistry, almost like mom's sketches. In the corner, scrawled in tiny print, was a name, C. Carter 1985. My chest tightened. I brought it into his room the next day and unrolled it across his lap. His eyes widened, and he tried to say something, but only air came out. I pointed to the signature. You designed this? He blinked once. Why didn't you ever show anyone? A pause. Then he tapped my wrist, tapped my chest. You were the dream, he was trying to say. But I saw something else. Regret. Unspoken potential. The shadow of a man who had once dared to imagine more. That week, I pitched the design to the city of Fort Collins, where my firm had a small-scale revitalization project along a public parkway. I modernized the drawing, updated materials, and presented it as a co-design by Carl Carter and Ethan Carter. They approved it. When I came home and told him, he stared at the rendering for a long time. Then, with his trembling left hand, he picked up a pen and scrawled something on the corner of the blueprint. Name it after her. So we did. The Emily Carter footbridge opened the following spring. It wasn't grand. It wasn't famous. But it spanned a quiet creek beside a playground, strong and graceful, just like her. At the ribbon cutting, he sat beside me in his wheelchair, sunlight warm on his face. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tears on his cheeks said everything. That night, I found a note on my pillow, shaky handwriting, black ink, fewer than 10 words. You were always the best thing I ever built. Dad, 3 weeks later, he passed away. In his sleep, peacefully. The wind chimes outside his window whispered gently as the night carried him away. Now, when I visit the bridge, I stand in silence. Not because there's nothing to say, but because, somehow, we said everything that mattered, without ever needing to speak it. Some bridges are made of steel and stone. Others are built from pain, forgiveness, and quiet love stretched over the years. If you're still waiting for the perfect moment to forgive or be forgiven, don't. Because sometimes, even silence holds love. And sometimes, the people who seem the most distant are the ones who loved us the hardest.